That brings us to our fourth presentation of the fourth finalist. The fourth presentation is by Garrett Johnson, Randall Lewis, and Elmar Nubbemeyer, and they're going to talk about improving the economics of measuring advertising effectiveness. So I'd like you to welcome Garrett here today. Thank you, Garrett.
Well, thank you. Today I'm going to talk about Ghost Ads, which is joint work with Randall and Elmar, who were at Google at the time and now are at Netflix. So I'm excited to be talking about Ghost Ads because this, after all, is Temple and we're in the altar building, so I'm feeling ready for a spiritual talk. All right, hallelujah. So my talk is going to begin a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away when I was searching the Macy's website for Star Wars-related products. And I came across this priceless item, which is a Darth Vader one-piece pajama suit. Only $49.99, but out of regard for my marriage, perhaps, I resisted the temptation to purchase. But then a funny thing started happening. So I visited my favorite hockey website, and I saw not one, but 3 ads from Macy's featuring the Darth Vader one-piece pajama suit. And then even when I went and took a look at our paper, there was the Darth Vader one-piece pajama suit stalking me again. So, I mean, I think this is a familiar experience. This is the experience of retargeting. But from the perspective of Macy's, you have to ask yourself, sure, a consumer has been exposed to our ads, but what if they were not exposed to our ads? What is the ROI of this? And this is really important when it comes to remarketing because someone that has browsed a Darth Vader one-piece pajama suit is about 10,000 times more likely to purchase it than someone from the general population, right? So, you know, an elegant solution to this is to run an experiment. And so we take, you know, identical people, we run them through the same consumer journey, and we show ads in the treatment group for Macy's. But then a question is, what do we show the consumers in the control group? And traditionally, the literature has answered this by showing these consumers an unrelated ad, like an ad for a Red Cross, or generally speaking, a public service announcement or PSA. And then at the end of the day, you're going to compare the probability of purchase in the treatment group to the control group. And that tells you the ROI of Macy's advertising. So I want to walk through today our Ghost Ads methodology. And to get us started, I'm going to revisualize this experiment in the following way. So we're going to imagine that we've got identical twins. One's been assigned to treatment. One's been assigned to control. They're each going to 3 websites and seeing an ad on each. And so the treatment user sees an ad for Macy's, Starbucks, and Macy's again, whereas the control group user has the ad swapped out for the Red Cross. Now, visualize this way, you can see that I'm not just talking about retargeting, but this is a general feature of advertising experiments. And so this is an elegant solution, but it has several problems. The first problem is that it's very expensive for somebody to have to purchase these Red Cross ads, and you have to be spending the same amount on them as the treatment ads. Now, you know, this is expensive, but what does that mean? It means that firms don't adopt experimentation, right? No advertiser in their history of advertising has said that they want to spend half their budget on PSAs every time that they run a campaign. So it's not a feature of everyday business practice. Now, consider an alternative. So what if we get rid of these Red Cross ads? Then in some sense, we could show the next best ad. So in this case, the ad has been swapped out for Zappos and for Disney. But this creates a problem of its own. So that problem is that when you're an analyst looking at the data after the experiment, you're going to be able to clearly identify who in the treatment group was exposed to a Macy's ad. But when you look at the control group, you're just going to see that the consumer was exposed to 3 different ads. You're not going to know that they were supposed to be exposed to 2 Macy's ads. In fact, you're not going to know if they would have been exposed to a Macy's ad at all. So what we want, essentially, is the best of both worlds. We want to show the consumer the ad they would have seen otherwise, but we want to recognize the ads that are somehow special, the ads that would have been Macy's ad had the user been assigned to treatment. So Ghost Ads deliver this, and Ghost Ads is effectively an additional ads database that's going to record these events where Macy's ads would have been shown to the control group user. More generally speaking, the definition of a Ghost Ad impression is a log entry that records when the experimental ad would have been served to the control user. Now, I'd like to stop at this moment and explain where the phrase Ghost Ads came from. It's a metaphor in 3 parts. The first part is that ghosts are invisible. And from the perspective of the consumer, there's no differentiating between which ones of these are ghost ads as if the ghost ad was invisible. The second part of the metaphor is that ghosts possess things, right? We know this from reliable sources like basically any Ghostbusters movie. And the sense in that these ads are possessed is that these two ads are known to be, by the ad platform and by us as the analysts, ads that would have been ads from the experiment. The final part of the metaphor is the word ad, because properly speaking, a ghost ad isn't actually a real ad that a consumer is being exposed to. But from the perspective of the analyst, we're operating on the databases after the fact, and so the ads database is functionally equivalent to the ghost ads database. So how does this work? Well, in general, the ad platform selection process is quite complicated, but you can imagine that it's an auction. And so for the treatment group user, that auction is going to include the Macy's ad, and for the control user, it's going to omit the Macy's ad. And so obviously, some percentage of the time, the Macy's ad is going to win the auction for a treatment group user, but for the control user, some other ad is always going to win. Now, what we'd like to have happen is to somehow know when it would be that the control group user would win the Macy's, so the Macy's ad would win the auction for the control group user, because then we'd have a nice symmetric comparison between the two sides. Now, unfortunately, this isn't possible because we never include Macy's in the control auction. So our solution is to run two auctions. The first auction is a simulated auction, and that simulated auction is going to include Macy's as one of the set of advertisers. And whenever Macy's wins that simulated auction, we're going to record a ghost ad event. Now, there's three things to notice from this. The first is that the original problem here is that we needed to find a symmetric comparison between the treatment group users and the control group users. We're now able to do that by comparing the people that win the Macy's ad auction in the treatment group versus the ones that win in the simulated auction. So we have the nice symmetry there. The second thing to realize is that there's no feedback between the simulated auction and the actual auction. So we don't have to worry about this causing problems downstream and breaking the experiment somehow. The last thing to realize is that in order to run this simulated auction, you basically need the cooperation of the ad platform, who's gathering all the bids from all the advertisers. Later, I'll tell you a methodology that's more flexible. So to quickly summarize the benefits of ghost ads, the first benefit I've already mentioned, which is the high cost of running PSA experiments. The second is more subtle. So, and that is that we're delivering what we think is the correct strategic baseline. So put another way, if you are Macy's and you're not advertising, you know, the Red Cross rescues many people in need, but they don't rescue your customers, right? So they're not going to be showing ads to your customers. You're going to have competitors that are showing ads to your customers. And so what this provides is the net effect of both your advertising and also displacing the ads of your competitors, which is, again, what we think is the correct strategic ad baseline. The third benefit is validity. And this is kind of where ghost ads came from. Ad platforms have become so sophisticated using machine learning algorithms to match consumers to advertising that now when the ad platform chooses a group to show the Macy's ad to, it's not going to be the same type of people that the ad platform chooses to show the Red Cross ad to. And because an experiment is predicated on an apples-to-apples comparison between these two groups, this is no longer going to be a valid comparison. Now finally, one thing that they both share in common is the ability to deliver a precise estimate. So what this means is that by identifying everyone that's exposed to the ad and would be exposed to the ad in the control group, we can drop everybody that would not be exposed to the ad and isn't exposed to the ad from the estimator, and that improves our precision quite a bit. Now, today I've talked to you about ghost ads, but the paper actually discusses three methodologies. The second is predicted ghost ads, which is the methodology that we were able to implement at Google. And I'll be describing that in more detail in a couple minutes. But the third methodology is ghost bids. And ghost bids is notable because, as I mentioned before, ghost ads, and actually predicted ghost ads, requires the cooperation of the ad platform. Now, if you're an advertiser and you don't have that cooperation, or you don't trust the ad platform, then there's a way that you can run this logic by yourself, and that's simply by comparing the people that you bid on in the treatment group to tracking the people that you would have bid on in the control group. All right, now I want to talk through some of the difficulties of getting this implemented in practice. Now, to give you a brief history, the need to have a scalable experimentation platform is a long-standing problem, and that's because running these one-off experiments is very expensive, and it's quite often leads to mistakes that break the experiment. So during our time at Yahoo from 2008 to 2012, we worked with a lot of these one-off experiments that used either the PSA or a methodology without the PSA called intent to treat to analyze these experiments. And we really learned the nitty-gritty of the different limitations of this. And from these limitations, we realized the importance of creating ghost ads, and very nearly achieved this at Yahoo in 2012 before a management change kind of made it all disappear. Now, we were able to resurrect ghost ads at Google. In 2014, we launched the first alpha of ghost ads, which included 2 advertisers, including the one that I'll be featuring. And then in 2015, we launched a public beta on the Google Display Network, where many advertisers could make use of the platform. So this is all to say that ghost ads arose from nearly a decade of experience across 2 companies. And as you might imagine, there is a lot of engineering and organizational challenges in making this come to fruition. So I do want to focus more on the implementation problems that we were working to solve. So I want to begin by talking about predicted ghost ads. Now, the challenge here, which is a little bit unexpected, is that ad platforms, you would expect they choose the ad that gets shown to the user, but there's actually an additional step that can break the ad that's actually shown to the user. So they're recommending not choosing exactly what will be shown. So what are some of these things that can break it? Well, the publisher could surprise you by saying, no, we don't want this advertiser. The publisher could surprise you by saying, the price is not what we told you, and it's higher than you expected. There could be a technological problem, say on the user's end, that breaks the ad, or it could just time out. This process is pretty miraculous that you're able to sell an ad in like 0.1 seconds, but occasionally it does time out. So what does this mean for us? Well, kind of going back to the ghost ads, you could imagine that we're showing 6 different users the ads for Macy's, or trying to show rather, but in one case the ad gets refused, let's say by the publisher, because the publisher has it in for Macy's. I don't know why. So what actually gets shown is a Zappos ad. Now, the problem is that the ghost ads are telling us that we wanted to show ads to all 6 of these users. And now we've broken the symmetry here because we have a different number and different type of users in the treatment group to those in the control group, and this is no longer a valid comparison. So our innovation, or one of our innovations, was to say that what you should be doing instead is you should be running the simulated auction for both treatment group and control group users. And because this is a process that cannot be interfered with, you're going to guarantee a symmetric comparison between users on the treatment side to users on the control side. Now, kind of revisualizing this in the boxes before, you can see what we've done is we've just run the simulated auction in both sides for treatment and control users. So the insight here was to realize that instead of getting 100% of the users that were exposed to the Macy's ad and making the experimental comparison kind of 100% wrong, there may be some slippage between the simulated auction and the real auction, but for the 99% of users we could correctly predict will be exposed to the ad, we're going to get that experimental comparison 100% right. So there's a lot of other challenges that came along the way. The core challenge here is ensuring the symmetry between the treatment group and control group so that the comparison is unbiased. Now, this is a very tricky thing to do because these ad platforms are always evolving and they're always coming out with new iterations, and that tends to break kind of any system that you try to create. So the fact that we created both predicted ghost ads and ghost bids is helpful because they're very robust to many of these things that can happen upstream, especially when used in combination. Now, one specific challenge that came up at Google is that when Google runs these auctions, they don't run just a single ad auction at a time. They actually run a complex combinatorial auction for the whole page. Now, the reason for this is that some advertisers want to be showing up in all 3 of the slots on the page, and some advertisers only want to show up on 1. So we're going to have to run this simulated auction for the full web page at the same time. The next challenge is more subtle, but cropped up as we started to expand this platform and have multiple experiments, and that is that these experiments can interfere with each other. So imagine that you're in the control group for both IKEA and Macy's, and Macy's wins the simulated auction. We log a Macy's ad. But if IKEA was in second place, we have a problem, because we're not going to log an IKEA ghost ad. But that's kind of the wrong way of looking at things, because in the real auction, there's no such thing as Macy's participating in that auction, because they're purely there as an artifact of the simulation. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to run a separate simulation for every single one of the advertisers in the platform at the same time. And when we solved that problem, it was sort of the breakthrough that made it so that these experimentation platforms were giving us valid results. All right, now I want to pivot and tell you about who uses ghost ads and how they use it. Now, the paper gives the example of a sporting and outdoor retail goods seller that primarily sells online. They've asked to be anonymous, so we affectionately refer to them as SportsThing. And SportsThing ran a retargeting campaign, like the one I started out the presentation with. And what they're able to show is that visits on websites increased by 17% and sales increased by 10.5%. Now, this is significant for a few reasons. The first is that this is actually the first academic evidence that retargeting can be effective. This is a long-standing and controversial topic in the literature and in practice, because retargeting is kind of manufactured to look good. You're showing ads to people that look like they're right about to purchase. But it is possible that because retargeting is really privacy invasive, that it actually backfires and actually hurts sales. We're able to show that for at least this advertiser that it's a net positive. And one thing I want to come back to is, what is possible with this methodology versus other methodologies? And an important thing for advertisers is to learn the effectiveness of their advertising and to do so efficiently. We're able to show that they're able to get precise measurement for 1/10 of the cost of the alternative PSA and intent to treat approaches to running these experiments. Now, we ran actually a couple other studies that were doing retargeting. So DefShop is a German retailer that sells hip hop and urban streetwear. And they found more evidence that retargeting worked. Effect size is kind of comparable to what we found in the other case. So there was a 12% increase in purchases, a 23% increase in site visits, and lastly a 38% increase in related keyword searches. Now, what both these campaigns share is that naive attribution, which just says that anyone that you show the ad to is going to be caused to purchase, we kind of intuit that that's wrong, that that's going to overstate the total amount of people that actually purchase. The question is by how much, and we find that it's a factor of 10. So in other words, 90% of the sales among the consumers that are exposed to this retargeting campaign would have happened without seeing the retargeting campaign. So companies are able to make better decisions about the retargeting efforts. Now, from this case study came a really nice quote from someone who works at DefShop who said, in the past, it was not possible for us to measure the incremental revenue of our campaign. We tried different testing methods, but none of them had been as accurate as the testing methodology developed by Google, namely by us. So I selected this quotation for a couple of reasons. The first part is really powerful because she's saying that marketers are literally flying blind without the ability to run these experiments and actually understand how much of their marketing efforts are causal. And the second reason is, the second part reinforces the message from before that this way of running experiments has a lot of benefits to advertisers. Now, this methodology actually powers Google's experimentation platforms when it comes to online display advertising. Google has two offerings in this dimension. One is conversion lift, the other is brand lift. And the difference between the two of them is that conversion lift shows you the effect on site visits and on conversions like purchases and signups, whereas brand lift shows you the impact on survey outcomes like intent to purchase or brand favorability, as well as lifts in related search queries. Now, conversion lift, as I mentioned, has been on the Google Display Network since 2015. More recently, it was expanded to YouTube. And what's significant about this network is that it features 2 million websites that reach over 90% of users. And indeed, predicted ghost ads is an important feature on this. We're logging over 100 million predicted ghost ads every day at Google. Now, I'm not able to tell you the exact number of advertisers that have made use of this so far, but I can tell you that in the first 3 months, we hosted 432 large ad experiments by 431 ad firms. And these totaled 1.6 billion users. And we know this from a related follow-up work that analyzed all these experiments. Now, 432 is a very large number, but I wanted to try and put some faces on this number. And so I dug up these case studies that Google put on its blog, the Think with Google blog, and they publicly published 6 case studies for the conversion lift product and 21 different studies for the brand lift product. Now, you can see that this is a wide array of advertisers. You've got some advertisers you've seen before, probably some that you haven't. A wide array of countries, so everything from Canada and New Zealand to the United States and Europe. We have all sorts of different industries. We've got 5 different car manufacturers that are represented. We also have fast food and entertainment companies and technology companies. So many different advertisers have found this to be useful. Now, instead of going through each one of these case studies individually, I wanted to convey to you some of the themes that came across from this that, again, speak to the insights that firms were able to gather using ghost ads that they weren't able to gather otherwise. Now, the first theme is the danger of chasing after the wrong objective. So firms had previously focused on clicks, and they'd measured the effects of advertising using last click attribution. And in a couple of examples, that tended to overstate the actual effectiveness of their marketing. So in the case of Fujifilm, the incremental conversions were twice as many as the click-through conversions. For Secret Escapes, a travel company, this was even, the incremental effect was 4 times larger than the click-based measurement. So Tableau, who also did this, had a nice quote saying that the Google's Lift experiment helped us to see the full conversion picture, not just the last click, so that we can confidently measure the impact of display. Now, I've already spoken to you about this theme of the value of retargeting that certain firms found through this tool. But one interesting thing that came out of it is that when firms are so focused on the last click, they tend to overvalue the effectiveness of media like search and undervalue the effectiveness of display and of creating awareness higher up the marketing funnel. So firms found it very helpful to be able to document the causal effect of these upper funnel campaigns, which gave them a renewed enthusiasm for this form of marketing. The final theme is the ease with which firms could now optimize their campaigns. So it was now easier to choose the best creative and roll that to the larger audience. It was now easier to find the most affected segments in a campaign. And finally, it was now possible to optimize the campaign midstream. This is not something that's possible in a typical one-off experiment because you don't even get the results until a few weeks after the fact. Here you can do it while the campaign runs. So in order to conservatively estimate what we think is the number of advertisers that have made use of this, I'm just going to expand the numbers from those first 3 months forward to today. And that would say that we have had at least 4,600 advertisers make use of this platform, involving millions of dollars in ad spend, and also implies that we've been able to reach 17 billion user observations. So if we want to take the McDonald's impact test, if you will, both Ghost Ads and McDonald's have had the virtue of having billions and billions served. So a few quick words about the academic impact of this. We think it's notable, and we're proud of the fact that the field experiment and randomized control trial literature is a very long literature. and a very difficult literature to have a methodological improvement on, and we think we were able to achieve that with this paper. The paper is published in Journal of Marketing Research last year, and I was happy to get the news last week that it's won the Paul Green Award for the best article in JMR that demonstrates the greatest potential to contribute significantly to the practice of marketing research. The paper has a broad readership, both within industry and within academia. It's been downloaded almost 2,000 times, making it one of the top 1% all time. It was one of the top 10 most viewed articles at MSI a couple years ago. It's been taught to students at all different levels at many different institutions. And one thing that's been really cool for us is to see ghost ads start to enter the lexicon. So I was able to hear it mentioned in a top industry podcast. Facebook, in their description of their experimentation platform, has to explain kind of what are ghost ads and how what we do compares to ghost ads. So I next want to talk about transportability. I've already talked, along one dimension. It's not just Sportsing that made use of this. This is thousands of advertisers that have made use of this experimentation platform. But one other really neat thing is that we've had other platforms, other ad platforms, adopt these methodologies and make use of that. Allow their advertising customers to make use of it. So, one feature of this industry is that people are a little hush-hush about exactly what they're doing. So we've heard of a handful of cases that make use of it, but I am able to tell you about 3 different companies. The first 2 are MediaMath and AdRoll. These are demand-side platforms purchasing ads in real time. They're both making use of ghost bids, and Netflix is making use of ghost bids and ghost ads. We know this from publicly posted sources. So just to dig into AdRoll a bit more, AdRoll is making a big push with their AdRoll X product, which is again using ghost bids. Here's a figure from their white paper describing the importance of incrementality testing. It was super, super cool for me to see this and to see our methodology explained back to us in print with professionals creating the images. Now, AdRoll is also making a big splash with this, so they have created a separate branded product for their incrementality offering. This is a screenshot from their website pushing it out. I encourage you to check it out, but again, it's very gratifying to see them take this so seriously. Now, I also wanted to say a little bit about Netflix. So we had the chance to speak to Stephen McBride, who's the Director of Science and Analytics at Netflix, and he told us that from Netflix's perspective, a core principle is the importance of evidence-based decision-making. Now, in order to evaluate the effectiveness of advertising, Netflix takes incrementality incredibly seriously. And when we were able to talk to Stephen, he mentioned that there's 5 different criteria that Netflix had for an experimental methodology. It was reliability, unbiasedness, scalability, precision, and cost effectiveness. And he told us that in his estimation, the ghost ads methodologies best fulfilled these business relevant criterion. Now, we also know from follow-up work by Randall Lewis and his collaborator at Netflix that they've been able to build on top of this experimentation platform to evaluate the effectiveness of single ad impressions and be able to provide a bid for each separate impression as it comes along in real time. Now, this effectively is solving the attribution problem because you're understanding which impressions are more valuable, which ones are less valuable, and bidding accordingly. All right, so to conclude, I want to say that I'm greatly humbled that we were finalists for this prize. We are tremendously gratified that thousands of advertisers have made use of this platform. At the end of the day, this is all about accountability. And if the CMO is entering the boardroom and only has metrics like reach and clicks and retweets and likes, then it's going to be easier for the marketing organization to be seen as a cost generator rather than a value generator. Now, we think that ghost ads is transformative because it creates accountability. It allows marketers to show the causal effect of their marketing efforts so they can treat advertising as an investment and confidently measure the ROI of that investment. We think that this is going to lead to both better marketing and we hope ultimately increase the standing of the marketing organization within the firm. Thank you. So, questions? And if I have one request, could you just say one question at a time? The RAM is limited here, so 2 questions is a little too much.
Okay, thanks for the lead. So then let me ask you a question that is mostly for my benefit, since this is an area that I don't operate on. I found it fascinating that you had to actually simulate the ghost bids. You had to use that part also when the bids were won, right? Because of various reasons, the ad ends up not being shown. But then the intuition is that to go to, and you're mentioning that that creates a lot of complexity, right? Because of the way the bids are done for parts of the page, for the entire page.
Yep.
So my question is, my surprise, it suggests that actually the number of times when you win a bid, but you end up not showing the ad, must be high enough such that it would benefit the problem solving to go to the ghost bids, which obviously have some intrinsic measurement error too.
So with predicted ghost ads, as you say, there's that slippage between the number of ads that you expect will be shown and the number of ads that are actually shown. Now, that slippage in practice, as I understand it, is not ginormous. It can be on the order of 1%. But even on the order of 1%, when you're trying to look at differences in conversions, and people are converging kind of 1 out of 10,000 times, and the causal lift in conversion is on the order of 1 in 100,000, that 1% can create bias in your estimator that could cause you to get a wrong estimate of the causal effect of advertising. So, the credibility is the foremost important thing to this. We need to be able to show that the users in the treatment group are the same as the users in the control group. We know from experience that when we don't address this slippage, it breaks that symmetry and makes our results not credible.
I understand, but that would require that your simulated bid process have an error that is even lower than the 1%, right? So that was actually my question. I understand what you're trying to correct, but then the simulated bid process has to be extremely good predictor.
Yeah, for sure, and that's part of a metric that we use to evaluate it. And what we found is that we were able to predict 97% of impressions and 99.9% of exposed users. So we're able to get a valid estimate on 99.9% of users at the cost of 0.1%, but those are kind of lost to us because of these experimentation problems. So yes, the predictor is really quite excellent.
Okay.
So I kind of obviously like this paper. I've read this before. So my question is actually more about, I heard about the 4,000 advertisers that have used it and so on, and I think this might be useful for academics as well to understand. If suppose one of our faculty wanted to learn something about advertising, right? Like, meaning whatever the substantive area is, how would they take advantage of this platform in order to be able to do an experiment? Do they have to partner with Google? How exactly would it work?
Yeah, so I think that's one advantage of this is that sometimes work that happens in industry stays in industry, and this is a public-facing tool for everyone's benefit. So if you were a researcher, I would encourage you, the information about brand lift is publicly posted on Google's website. Conversion lift, you'll have to talk to an account executive. Now you're going to need to be working with an advertiser that has quite a large budget to be able to detect something reliably, but this is available to anyone that satisfies that criterion.
But does it require some specific contracting with Google, or can just the public-facing tool be used by anybody? As long as I'm partnering with an organization, I should be able to run this?
Yeah, it's basically a phone call. And then the great thing about the ghost ads is that it literally is turnkey. You just press a button, and you can turn the experimentation on and off. So it really solves the kind of fixed costs in setting up these experiments.
Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to thank Garrett for a terrific presentation. Thank you very much indeed. We've had 4 wonderful finalists, and I'd like to thank them all. So thank you very much indeed.